If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. 2, 3, 4, the hardest part of the ring. The hardest part of the ring. Sometimes you go over that top rope and you bang your head on the ring apron. Don't do that. That's when you feel like a big dope. Because they're the worst bumps you can be taking. Oh, it's the hardest part of the ring. Now the hardest part of the ring. Alright, sometimes you reach out for that hot tag. And you go ahead and make your own comeback. Knock it off. That's when you should quit wrestling. And you're better off rolling in thumbtacks. Hey, top of you, the hardest part of the ring. The hardest part of the ring. Hey, sometimes you're distracting a referee, and the babyface has your wrestler pinned. Then you get punched to the ring apron, and you realize all the trouble you're in, 'cause it's the hardest part of the ring. The hardest part of the ring. Now double claps. 100 times, Pop Squad. 100 episodes, here we go. It's the hardest part of the ring. The hardest part of the ring. Ba-da-ba-da. Whoa, what is happening right now? Welcome, Bob Squad, to episode 100 of the hardest part of the ring. I couldn't do it without you. Maybe I could have. No, I totally couldn't have. Not even remotely close. Who the hell am I kidding? I'm not going to pull your leg. I'm not going to yank your chain. I'm not going to pull the wool over your eyes. I'm not going to sweep the carpet out from under your feet. I have heard the rumors, the skinny, the scuttlebutt, the deep dish daddy. I've been hoodwinked, flim-flam, shim-shammed, and bamboozled by every single weirdo, wacko, sicko, psycho, nympho, porno, pyro, every kind of O there is. Cheerio, Eskimo. It doesn't matter. Because we're rocking and rolling, we're strutting, strolling, we're slamming, jamming, and we're moving and grooving, living on the edge of a lightning bolt, making your back crack, your body shake, your knees freeze, your liver quiver with a hole in your heart and a pain in your pancreas. It is absolutely bananas. It is off the hook, off the wall, off the chain, under the table, under the weather, under the radar, like a champ, like an animal, like a beast, like a savage, like a warrior, like a madman, like a jackhammer, like a steamroller, like a firecracker, like a bulldozer. Did I say bulldozer already? Who cares? Like a runaway freight train. We are hip to that scene. We are down like a clown. We are out of here like Vladimir, chilling like Bob Dylan on penicillin, burning the midnight oil, burning the candle at both ends, punching the clock, passing the buck, working hard but hardly working, rubbing salt in a wound, throwing gas on the fire, adding insult to injury, talking to candy and eating strangers. I know what I said. And the grass is always greener when the early bird gets the grease. We are hogging the covers, staining the sheets, pissing blood and bleeding piss, a one-trick pony, beating a dead horse, squeezing the lemons, stopping on a dime. Don't know where we're going, but we are making good time as we are saving trees, hugging whales, kissing hands, and shaking motherfucking babies on our 100th episode of the hardest part of the ring. I need some water. All right. Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, what a journey it has been. A lot of songs sung. Actually, I have not sang that song 100 times. I think it's like 70 or 80 times. I was doing random songs at the top. Who cares? What should we do for the 100? I was asking myself. I had a few back and forths. Do I cover this? Do I cover that? Should it be a special old-timey show that we all love? What could I possibly give you for a 100th episode? Well, I guess I've mentioned this once or twice. Sporadically, I'll mention this, but I think in the first episode I covered it for like a minute, and I didn't want to talk about it ever again. But why not save it for a special occasion? I thought today I would reveal uh, briefly up top, a history of my first introduction to the 32-year now stint of watching pro wrestling, and how I got involved in WXW and my time wrestling for Alpha the Wild Samoan. And I don't think we'll cover the San Diego indie scene another time, but yeah. So I guess my fandom and wrestlingdom from ages 9 through 23, I think, would be a good place to go. Okay, shall we? Let's begin. Now, I was born in 1980, and as an 80s youth, just as you know your He-Man, you know your G.I. Joe, you know who Optimus Prime is, you have your other toy lines as your Mask and your Ghostbusters, etc., etc. One of your other big famous toy lines was your WWF at the time wrestlers, and I'm still talking about the mid-80s, the giant rubber LJN toys. And for a young boy in the 80s, pro wrestling was really just another toy line. It wasn't really a thing you could watch for your whole life. It was just another another thing that made toys, and they just happened to be based off of guys you saw on TV, which in your mind might as well have been cartoons anyway. So they had these big rubber things, and I'm not going to repeat what they said in the toys that made us. These are dog toys and all that for the Netflix thing they did. The toys that made us, whatever the hell it was. I see their point. I do remember. I never owned it. I do remember the King Kong Bundy one could basically kill a human. That was something that siblings threw at each other. Was the King even thicker and bigger than the Andre one? Was King Kong Bundy, and you could easily murder someone with the King Kong Bundy toy. It was so much solid rubber. It was absolutely insane. I only had one, which again, that's like being a kid with one walkie-talkie. What do you do with one wrestling figure? I had one, and believe it or not, it was their then Legend series, Bruno Sammartino. So I had a rubber Bruno Sammartino, and he fought my Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator guy. But then I really had two wrestlers, I guess, and that league didn't last too long. I used a rubber band as the championship belt that sagged, and Bruno never lost, so didn't last long. And I didn't. I thought the thumb wrestlers were cooler because they were smaller, and I saw kids with the Piper and Hogan thumb wrestlers. But I put it out of my mind because in '87, '88, I was still a GI Joe all the way, and Transformers too. Whatever Transformers that were still being made, I really love them as well. And Masters of the Universe had kind of gone to the wayside about 2 years before that. And I put wrestling out of my mind until Memorial Day weekend of 1989, taking a trip from Upper Westchester County above New York City down to my Grandpa Angelo. I had two Grandpa Angelos, by the way. I used to think that was a law. That's another story for another day, that your grandpas had to have the same name. But you wouldn't know it from looking at me, but that's how Italian the family was. I had two Grandpa Angelos. But on Memorial Day weekend, it was decided that we would all go down, the family, and I think it was near his birthday, and surprise Grandpa Angelo on Memorial Day weekend. It was the Saturday of the weekend. We're just going to be there for a few hours, and he always watched WWF Superstars, which then aired at, I forget if it aired at 10, 11, or 12. It was one of those three. It moved around a little bit, but it was 10 o'clock for the longest time. And though I knew who Hulk Hogan and a few other popular wrestlers were from the toy lines, 2 years is a long time when you're 9 years old. That's like another lifetime ago. So really, these guys are out of my mind. And I'm in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, one of the more southern parts of Brooklyn, closest to the Atlantic Ocean. Not as southern as Coney Island, but that would be literally on the beach. But who cares? Who the hell cares about the geography of this? I'm in Brooklyn. There's an old 70s green shag carpet. And I used to love to play with the carpet and make it go one way and make it go the other way, and it would just amuse me to no end. And they had an ottoman that would roll back and forth, and I would roll the ottoman back and forth, and they'd yell at me to stop doing it. But I'd always be, at that point, I was always allowed to bring like a couple of small toys just to occupy myself. They're like, whatever. And at the time, it probably was Turtles, because I remember my grandma was concerned because Shredder was kind of pointy, and she didn't really want that anywhere near the furniture. But anyway, playing with my toys on a green shag carpet, and my grandpa, apparently, I had just found this out on this day, loved to watch WWF wrestling. His favorite thing to do in the world was watch wrestling. And he's got his bare feet up on the ottoman, so I can't play with the ottoman. And I don't think my grandma wanted Shredder and the Turtles near the furniture, so I was leaving the toys alone for a little bit. So all I can do is stare at the TV. And the Bushwhackers are wrestling the Fabulous Rougeau brothers. The Bushwhackers, I'm confused. I didn't know what Australians were, or French Canadians for that matter. Because the Bushwhackers have camouflage pants, so I thought they were Army guys, like U.S. Army guys. I didn't know why they went, whoa, yay, and did a funny walk and licked kids. That was normal somehow. So I didn't understand. Aren't these Americans? Because they must be Army guys because they're wearing camouflage. On the other hand, the French Canadians, the Fabulous Rougeau brothers, had tiny little American flags, and they were waving them. I thought, well, who's the Americans? Because I'm an 80s kid, so I grew up on Rocky IV. Superman 4, everything us versus the Russians. It was America's good guys automatically, etc., etc., etc. Not much has really changed. But I'm like, well, who are the Americans? Who are the good guys? Because these guys have little flags. I didn't understand they were waving tiny flags ironically, because I don't know what irony is. I'm 9. And WrestleMania, we're just a few months after WrestleMania 5. Hogan has defeated Savage. He's only been champion again, I guess, for 2 months at this point, but for all I know, it's been 20 years. I don't really know. And I'm watching it, and I'm interested. Well, I don't know why these guys are getting cheered, why these guys are getting booed, because it looks like they're all good guys, but something's going on. And there's a little man, Jimmy Mouth of the South Heart, with a megaphone, and he seems to be antagonizing everyone. I don't know why he's allowed to do that. And I'm looking at the action, and when you're 9 and 10 with pro wrestling, it's a lot like Santa Claus. Because when you're like 5, 6, even 7, you're pretty much all in. And then 8, 9-ish, you start to ask a few questions, and by 10, and definitely by 11, you're kind of like, okay, I think the jig is up. Even if you don't know how the magic is made, you know someone's making it. So I was a little confused, because I was a little old enough to know this was a really improbable fight, but I didn't think you were allowed to lie on TV, so it must be real. Even though I had so many questions as to how this all happened so perfectly. But anyway, I turn, because I have the attention span of a 9-year-old, and I look at my grandpa's bare feet up on the ottoman, and for whatever reason I counted his toes, and I counted several times. I counted 9 toes several times, and you don't do these things subtly in your brain when you're a kid. You would literally have like your hand like with your. I'm moving my finger right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I was not supposed to know that my grandpa Angelo had 9 toes. So I turn, and then I could see my mother in my peripherals, like making a gesture because she was doing the math. As I was doing the math, she was doing the math, and I didn't want my days to be numbered, even though his toes were numbered. She said I could tell she was making me a face, like a thumb across the throat, like cut it, like knock it, like don't you dare, because I was clearly about to ask why Grandpa Angelo, why do you have 9 toes? So this was not information I was supposed to know. So my mother gave me the death stare, and she just pointed to the TV as if to say, stare at it. Just shut up and stare at it. I don't care what is on it right now. And of course, it happened to be pro wrestling. So I stared at that, never asked about the toes. I got different stories from World War II injury, World War II accident, World War II grenade, whatever, to elevator repairman and got stuck in an elevator and lost it. I heard a variety of stories I'll never know. Doesn't really matter because you don't need to know how the magic is made. So from May of 1989 to today, 32 plus years, that was the beginning of my nonstop watching of pro wrestling. Because my grandpa Angelo had 9 toes, my mother didn't want to tell me why. So that is why I became a wrestling fan. Let's fast forward a little bit. Years went by. You're a wrestling fan as a teen, which means you're kind of a closet fan. In college, it was different because I was a college student from 98 to 02. So those first 2 years of college, for me, everyone's an Attitude Era fan, and everyone's watching in the dorms, and Monday Night Wars, and yada, yada, yada. But I was hell-bent. I'm going to be a pro wrestler. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shoot for the stars. I'm going to be idealistic. That's what I'm going to do. Told everyone that. Family, of course, hates this, laughs at it, etc., etc. So I'm in college in northeastern Pennsylvania. It is got to be late 99? Yeah, it was late 99. And I was doing some internet research, which took a long time at the time. We had like the dorms dial-up or whatever the hell. This took a while. You really had to care to do internet research. There was no Google. There was Yahoo. It took a long time. But I knew that in the state of Pennsylvania, because ECW was alive and well, that independents would often kind of offshoot of those, and surely you can find a pro wrestling school in northeastern or eastern Pennsylvania. And did I ever? So I found off of the Wild Samoans Pro Wrestling Training Center in Hazleton, which was a half an hour south of Wilkes-Barre, where I went to school. And thankfully, I was very fortunate. My folks were very good, especially my dad, about having a used car lying around all the time, and I kind of convinced them to let me more or less have it, because they always had an extra in a driveway. Because between my dad and my brother, someone's always fixing a car, having a pet project car, and something, something, something. So I got pretty lucky. I got this '98 Plymouth Acclaim to beat up for a bit. And what happened next? I forget. Well, anyway, I whatever money I had, I agreed to meet Off of the Wild Samoan on a tryout, which because Gary Albright, a All Japan pro wrestler who was a member of the Wild Samoan family, he died in their ring basically in late '99. My tryout got put off, and it got moved to coincidentally my 20th birthday, February 20th of 2000. And I was training so hard because at this point, for 2 or 3 years beforehand, basically since I graduated high school, I was hitting the weights more. I was still running, but I was trying to get a little more tone. It was actually Sabu, seeing Sabu up close, who was my hero when I was a teenager. I thought he was the greatest wrestler in the world because of the cool stuff he did, right? But I was in the third row at an ECW show in Connecticut, and I saw him up close. And I'm like, oh, I saw the tricep and shoulder definition. I'm like, oh, geez, I better hit the weights. You can't just flip and fly around. Yeah, you gotta have some tone on you. And I did all I could. I put on all the muscles I could. I was hitting them weights every day in the gym, probably counterproductive and doing too much. But what is that? Eventually, that's just going to get you a hernia. LOL. So I'm lifting my weights. Anyway, I do the tryout, and I get to this school, and I'm nervous as all hell because I'm thinking it's like a real tryout. I didn't know that. Listen, they just need to make sure you're not going to keel over and die, and then they're prepared to take your money, and it's all non-refundable. And get in the ring, and if you hate it, you hate it. Thankfully, you signed the waiver. You're not they're not responsible if you completely kill yourself. So I get there. Oh, this is going a little long. Okay, I'll get in as much of this as I possibly can. Let me get some water. First things first. I'll get this out of the way. I'm in the office. And by the way, this is an American Legion Hall. There's no AC in the winter. There's no heat in the winter. There's no AC in the summer. I walked past this big, old, dirty WWF ring because I guess Vince had given off one of his old rings. So I trained on the super hard one, inevitably, before Foley took the big bump and they made it softer and everything else. Except ours were beat up and not as well maintained, of course. So the boards get warped with the temperature, and the spring is off the ground pretty much. So you might as well just call it a boxing ring, and that's what 185-pound Bob bumped it. So that went well. I'm in the office with Off the Wild Simone and his wife, Lynn, and she says to Alpha, "Oh, look, it says here on his application that today's Robert's birthday. How about a picture with Robert, LOL, for his birthday?" And Pop says, "Okay." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. In my mind, I get to stand up and take a picture with Off the Wild Samoan." And Off was a little bit before my generation, but I was a Head Shrinkers fan in the early '90s. Like I knew who they were. Um, Samu wrestled there at the time and everything else, and of course Fatu was Rikishi at the time on TV. So I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Me and a wrestling legend, we get to take a picture together. So Afa stands up and he grabs some picture, and some piece of paper. He writes something on it, and he hands it to me. And the picture that Afa gave me for signing up for my 20th birthday, is a picture of himself and The Rock, which he signed to Robert, "Happy Birthday, God bless, Afa, The Rock's uncle," which is so goddamn funny. I think I'm going to use that as the picture for this thing. Anyway, so then it's tryout time, and there were I only remember two things about that day really. You had to do this thing where you do 20 push-ups, sprint to one end of the building and back, do 19 push-ups, sprint back, 18, and on and on and on, and you sprint as fast as you can, do the push-ups and everything else. And Alpha, he's a big guy. He's very thin now if you see pictures of him today, but this is 21 years ago. He's a big guy, and he's older too. He's in his late 50s at the time, and so he's sitting down, he's watching me do all this, and thankfully, like he had said, like nobody gets down to zero. Really, I just want to see that you're going to do this until I'm going to see that you'll do this until your body stops and you don't actually give up. And I made it down to like 12 or 13, something like that. But he needed to see that I wasn't going to just say, "I'm tired, this hurts, I quit." He wanted to see everything I got, and that I had been, at least at the very least, working out, like exercising, that I was a healthy kid. So that went well, and then he had me do a bunch of sit-ups, and I don't remember how many I did in a row, but I did them, and he said, "Congratulations, you just broke Billy Kidman's record." Now, before it sounds like I'm patting myself on the back, hang on. Hold the phone back to buggy up, stop the press. He then said, a wrestler who, I guess most known for being the first guy with the mohawk to wrestle Mickey Rourke, in the wrestler. It wasn't a real mohawk. Sorry, Tommy. Tommy Suede. Tommy Suede, one of the better wrestlers there and trainers. He jumps in and he just beat that record, that whatever number I did, 90 whatever, he just did it, and just to he wasn't they weren't letting a new guy beat Kidman's record and have that kind of confidence. I don't know why. They had to take you down a peg. And I was told about this guy named Big Dave who had just left the organization and went to OVW in Louisville with Jim Cornette. Like 2 months ago or a month ago or whatever, right before I got there. They're like, "Oh, and you just missed it. You're the first new student since Big Dave. You have some shit." I'm like, "Okay, I had no idea who Big Dave is." Who went on to become Batista. But and then he said, "We're going to teach you to just jump up and take a bump." And they tell you what to do, but they didn't even really start with. Usually, I think when you teach someone to bump, you're laying down next to them. You teach them how to slap the mat as hard as they can, how to slap it without really hitting their elbows too bad, but mostly forearms and hands and triceps and yada yada yada, and how to kind of arch up and shove your pelvis up, provided you don't have a hernia, and so the middle of your back is protected a little bit. So it's like your ass and your upper back and your shoulder blades and your hands and forearms and tries, but not your elbows, and your chin is tucked. Excuse me, burp. And that kind of stuff. I don't even know if they had me do that. Later they would, when I'd go back, but they had me just jump up in the air, and they said just jump back and smack your hands against the mat. No one said anything about not holding your breath or breathing out or yelling out. That gets the air out of your body, so the bump, it doesn't completely kill you. So you may get winded from the physical exertion, but so you don't get winded from the actual bump, because it will knock the breath out of you. And it still happens anyway all the time, but just so you get into the habit of doing it right, so that you can take a bunch of bumps, and provided you're in good cardio shape, you can like not completely lose all your oxygen. No one said anything about that, and I think that was a test too, to be like, they know this is going to suck for me. So how does he handle it? What does he do? And on the inside, I'm like, I will die. I don't know if I could take another bump ever again, but I'm also like, I can't quit. I can't embarrass myself at this wrestling school. Of all the distinguished places in the world, I can't. I treated it like I was at Buckingham Palace. Like, I can't embarrass myself here, of all places, in this American Legion Hall in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. So they nodded. Pops kind of nodded. Pops. Oh, by the way, Alpha. If you're a student of Alpha's, you call them Pops. So actually saying Alpha is weird, but I was just saying that for reference. But from here on in, if I say Pops, it's Alpha. And Mom, or Moms sometimes, was Lynn, his wife. You could figure out. You can do the math. You can put those two together. So, I didn't actually start training the school. I wanted to be done with that semester of college first. So I guess I started in like May or June of 2000. I was working as a maintenance artist or a janitor at Subway to pay some bills. So I met all these characters, and and for 2 months it's just bumps. It's just bumps. It wasn't allowed to touch the ropes, no turnbuckles, no nothing. And I had a lot of trouble with face bumps, like landing on your face. But eventually you would get over it or you quit. And new people come into the school, and when new students arrive, you don't want them passing you. It's the last thing you want. I'll do a few stories to describe the atmosphere, because I could actually go on for 8 hours about every little detail of this. And a lot of it, quite frankly, I don't want to relive. But I'll tell you a few things of note. When you're a smaller indie wrestler, pro wrestler, trainee, almost in doubt, without doubt, you're going to have other jobs. If you come in and you're 6'5" and 270, like a good wrestling school promoter, trainer / indie promoter, because a lot of them go hand in hand. A smart one would, like Pops, honestly, would just keep you away from the public eye. You're not going to be a security guard. Even you'd be a great security guard, but you're not going to be a ring announcer. You're sure as hell not going to be a referee. you're going to be hidden until it's time to show you. When you're a smaller guy, when you're 185, whatever, maybe 190 at most of my time there, um, you're going to be a referee. I was a ring announcer for a night in, God, I forget. I think it was January of whatever the hell of 2000. I think it was actually a month before my tryout because my tryout was pushed back because of Gary Albright and all that. Yeah, I was a ring announcer for one night. I played music for a long time. I hated that. And a long time, I mean like 4 or 5 months, like 4 or 5 shows, something like that. But it felt like a long time because it was a bunch of tape decks and it was confusing. I didn't. There's all these wrestlers I don't know any of them and what their songs are, and they don't give you very clear instructions. And it was I was kind of led to the wolves, and I was so stressed out playing music for these indie guys for 23 people or whatever the hell it was. But at the time, this is the most important job. If I screw it up, I basically ruin the whole promotion. No, you don't. No one knows. But of course, I ended up being a referee, and I was probably a better referee there than I was a wrestler for most of the time. But uh, you learn a lot refereeing, especially refereeing a tag match. So much different. You learn stuff. In a second match I ever refereed, this kid did a moonsault onto his head and broke his neck, and then he got DDT'd, and then the kid was in a halo, like a big giant halo for like the next year or so. That had nothing to do with me. That wasn't on me, and I didn't know to ask. I mean, well, I do remember a really short kid, but not athletic, like a chubby short kid, Alex. Poor kid, is kind of strange. He got picked on, but that's pro wrestling. Hazleton, the year 2000, might as well be 1964 anywhere else in the country. So it was what it was. Um, it was a very. It could be. I mean, jokes. I mean, basically, it could be a very homophobic and racist and misogynist place. It sure can. And don't even try to compare it or justify it or whatever you want to do. What it was as it was. And this kid got picked on a lot, but he was told, "You can't do the moonsault. Don't do it. Don't do it. You're gonna break your neck. Do not do it. You're not athletic enough to do it. You barely sort of did one in training onto a crash pad. Do not do this, and don't do it onto another human being." And sure enough, he does it, lands on his head, breaks his neck. So that was the second match. The first match I refereed was a Falls Count Anywhere match, which who the fuck books that as a first? So basically, my first night as a referee, I refereed every match that show. You'll see that in the indies too a lot of times. But I was very nervous about being a referee. So I asked Afa the day before I was going to be a referee. I said, "Pops, I've never been a referee before." Like, he doesn't know that. Like, in hindsight, I think that was information he knew. And he says, "I've never been a referee before. Uh, what do I got to do?" And I already knew to go buy. I think I already went to Foot Locker and bought like a referee shirt. I think someone already told me to do that. Like, don't bother Pops with those kind of stupid questions. Ask anyone else. I'm sure I asked some other referees, and they were like, "Go to Foot Locker on the way home from this before it closes and get a referee shirt and then just buy it." And I did, and that was that. Um, but I said, "Pops, I've never been a referee before. Do you think I could have some kind of like crash course in being a referee?" And he said, "Son, tomorrow you're going to be the referee. I'm going to have a hot dog. There's your crash course." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Fair enough." And there you go, and you learn. There was a time that night where one wrestler had run out to hit another wrestler with a chair and blatantly did it in front of me, and I think he got yelled at for it. But I thought I was in trouble for it because that wasn't the finish, so I didn't disqualify him. But he got yelled at. He's like, I remember some other vote people in charge being like, "Hey, you ran out in front of the referee and just did that. What the hell?" You know, he's supposed to do. But you get blamed for a lot of shit when you're a ref, especially an indie ref, because you got to keep in mind a couple of things. First of all these guys, because they're doing it for no money, and I'm not talking about gas fee, hot dog, and a handshake. No, forget the hot dog. You're doing it for no money, like zero. So when you do something for $0, as you see with stand-up comedy too, as well as I've noticed, is that a lot of these little things are taken very seriously. So a lot of guys are don't want to lose matches, don't want to look bad. They want to have log matches where they do all their shit because they're not getting anything else out of it. But you can't have everyone. You can't have everyone win, obviously. You can't have everyone have long matches where they get all their shit, and you can't have everyone look good And when someone is losing, they're complaining about how they are being beat, like it matters in front of these 20 people. So there's a lot of that. And when you're wrestling for the Samoans, that family is a lot of most of the main eventers are members of that family, and they're like everyone's your boss. If their last name is Anawai, they're your boss essentially. So we had Samu, we had Alpha Junior, who became Manu later in 2008-ish, I think, for a brief stint. And a great guy Lloyd, or LA Smooth, who I was calling Lloyd. All these guys who and they're your boss. Lloyd was so nice though. Sam's nice too. Samu, he's intense. He can be intense, but he's actually a nice guy. The Samoans were generally like generous people. Like they were, on those nights where it's like, okay, we're going to the buffet. Like Pops once bought us all like just a giant Chinese buffet, and he ate all the tuna. And they actually ran out of tuna to sushi tuna at the buffet. Which I was told, like, yeah, his wife doesn't like him doing that. Don't be spending all this money. But yeah, they can be generous, like, out of nowhere. Just when you think they couldn't care any less, they're real generous, and there's like a big picnic, and and all sorts of stuff you can eat and all that crazy. So it's not totally trashing them. It's just 50-50, and sometimes stuff just comes out of nowhere. And who the hell knows, One time, we had this guy. I think he was a roadie for Guar, the heavy metal band with the costumes and all that stuff. And he had this gimmick where he was Crappy the Clown. He was a clown obsessed with poop. But he built this stage and this ramp that leads to the ring. Like the ramp is at the same level as the ring apron, which is the hardest part of the ring. From the stage, kind of like a miniature ramp. The guy was like a carpenter of some sort as well. And there was like a heel entrance and a face entrance from different sides of the building at one point. It was wild. But anyway, he built the thing, so he's a manager now. And his name was Krabby the Clown. He had this weird toilet paper gun, so when the baby face would be on the top rope, he would shoot it at the face. I think Tommy Suede is one in particular. He was wrestling Big Papa Pete. If you've seen Big Papa Pump, same thing. Don't ask. Poor Pete. Took a lot of abuse. Anyway, Crappy the Clown was a poop-obsessed manager. He didn't manage any of the tippy-top guys, I don't think, but he was there. Yeah, he dressed in all black and white, and he had, like, crazy light blue contact lenses, which people didn't have crazy contact lenses at the time. And we're in Pennsylvania, and the next day we had a show in New Jersey, and you didn't give everyone the address, they didn't Google map it. Maybe you Yahoo mapped it, and you printed them out. And that's how, and from different areas, or you just wrote out, here's how to get here from 4 different directions, from this state, this city, from the school, from wherever the hell. So, Lynn, off his wife, she yells, honey, can you give crappy directions for the show in Jersey tomorrow? He goes, crappy directions? Does he want to get there or not? I give you good directions. I know I'll tell you how to get there. And she's like, no, you don't understand. Can you get crappy directions to this show? I know how to get there. My directions are fine. Get out of my office. And I'm in a stairwell leading to this listening to this unintentional Laurel and Hardy conversation. And I look around and there are 0 witnesses to this. A crime. A crime against humanity, I say. I'm going to put a link in the description of this to a separate video of the Luna Vachon story. How Luna Vachon, I wrestled her, and she bit the skin off my back and ate it. I think that's, I can't retell it ever again as well as I told it on that night, and that's a recording from the Best Bob I Can Be on Amazon, who cares. So me wrestling, or being a referee, and becoming a wrestler, I had a few gimmicks. I was a guy in a mask. I wore a mask. The thing was, there were wrestlers. There were like 3 or 4 of us smaller wrestler/referee guys. And when these other wrestlers became referees, the thing was, everyone in the crowd who went to these weekly or monthly, I think it was bi-weekly for a long time, these shows, they recognize Nikki, Sammy, I'm just going to name them. They recognize these guys. Like, oh, they're wrestlers now. And they kind of laugh, and it's really hard to make an impact or be taken seriously because you were just a referee. But smaller wrestlers are really there. Sorry, folks, to listen. The promotion at the time, I don't know what it's been like. I know they're in Florida now, but it's designed for to make the Samoan wrestlers look the young, especially the younger ones like an Alpha Junior, look great on public access TV and to send tapes and get Kevin Kelly at the time, the scouting for WWF. It was to make the family and the right people, like the Batistas of the world too, like to make them look good. It was to make certain people look good so they can hopefully get hired by WWF at the time. That's what it was. And that's fine. And in turn, you pay your money and you get trained well. It was a bit of a bump school. It got a critique, a little criticism of this is a really bump heavy school. Like bumps, 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 bumps. And bumps are great, and bumps should be done a lot, and they should be done right. But you get to a point, um, you're just bumping the hell out of everyone. And every Tuesday and Thursday from like 5 to 8, we were just there bumping and bumping and bumping just for nobody. It got to a point where it's like we all know how to bump, but we're bumping because we're there. It's uh, I don't know. To me, it was like once you have it down, you have to not do that all the time. Good God, it was such a headache. They would just yell at you to bump, and the guys yelling at you loudest to bump all the time were big fat guys who could barely breathe and not bump themselves. So when they'd be yelling, you have to make the ring move, make the buckle move, and you kill your body doing that when you're 185 pounds. When you're 300 pounds and 100 of it is because you're overweight, it's like, yeah, you're going to make the ring move. Look, see, I made the ring move. Okay, whatever, Molson. Okay, easy, Bob. Um, it's kind of a joke. It's not great experiences. I wrestled as a few names. So I wrestled as a guy in a mask. I was very alty and hipstery before, long before that was a thing. I was a little ahead of my time. Forgive me, pat myself on the back. I weighing in on a scale from over there. I was a guy in a mask, and I wore some nonsensical outfits and danced around like a lot of Russian leg dancing. Just wanted to make no sense. I wanted it to be complete nonsense. And this is long before anyone was going to appreciate the originality or whatever you want to call it or creativity behind any of these gimmicks. And yes, I still should have been beaten by a lot of all the big guys and everything, but this was like, oh look, he's kind of funny sometimes and goofs around. It's choke slam him on his head, laugh about it, and hit him, blah blah blah. And for a long time, I was part of a tag team called Neil and Bob. I was Bob. Thankfully, I got to at least keep Bob or be Bob because the fans knew. Let me backtrack. I'm a guy in a mask. The mask I wore was like a black mask around your eyes, like Robin or Zorro. Like that was the mask. So I felt that since the fans are going to know the referee just wrestled, and the wrestler was just a referee, that if your match is 1, 2, and 3, and you're wrestling in match 2, you're going to referee 1 and 3. You're just going to be being a back getting changed. It's going to be very stupid. And the fans know, and they're laughing. And also, if you're refereeing a match and you just wrestled where you got squashed, you you shouldn't be seen again at all by anyone that night. But whatever, the hell do I know? So that was a thing. That was a bit of a thing there. So I figured, why not make a joke out of it? Because it's obvious anyway. So I'd be guy in a mask, and the mask was I'd have the black Zorro mask around my eyes, and be like, well, can't tell it's me. Until one day I became bad, and I slowly took it off, which is very, at the time I thought it was hilarious, but it was what it was. So I was Neil and Bob. I was part of a tag team. Nicky Ice, poor bastard. Samu, the head shrinker, thought it would be funny to have two guys from San Francisco, because that's where all the gay people are from, according to the stereotypes of the 90s and 80s, etc. They'll be from San Francisco, place to this day I've never been to, and there'll be Neil and Bob. Get it? Because like you're filleting another man, and I got to be Bob, and he thought this name was hilarious, and we had to jump around. But the problem is, it's still a kid show, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I convinced them to use the Humpty Dance for a song, which yeah, Humpty just died a few months ago. That was very sad. But anyway, um, so it got kind of weird because it's like we're sort of when we had to be bad guys, we acted kind of gay because it's old pro wrestling in Pennsylvania, so gay equals bad. And we were good guys. We just danced around and entertained the kids because you got to keep in mind it's 300-pound fat guy after 300-pound fat guy, all wearing black, trying to be tough guys coming out to whatever Kid Rock or Limp Bizkit or Rage or Korn or some bullshit, and then us. So at least we were a lightening of the mood for the show. And so we were good guys. We just danced around, but we were. I like to think we were getting over to a degree. People responded to us. Like at least we were happier. Like, oh, okay, the mood changed a little bit. And most likely, most of the time, we still got our ass kicked. Brief run at the tag team championships from August through October of 2001. We defeated the Moondogs. They beat us up, and like I took a backdrop, some chops, and a clothesline over the top, and Nikki got squashed in the middle. So in 2 minutes of that match, another tag team, the Twin Tackles, half of which was Gene Snitsky, or became Gene Snitsky later on in the Federation years, the WWE years. They laid out the Moondogs with chairs. The referee saw none of this somehow, and I think Nikki fell on top of one of the Moondogs. We pinned him, and that championship, the only championship I won in WXW, I won it. I was laying down on a ring selling by the ring apron, which is the hardest part of the ring, and this big bronze metal thing just smashes me in the hip. It was just thrown down on top of me by one of the guys who lost it. And that's how I gained my first championship belt, which I put on the coffee table for 2 months until we lost them to the Tackles and Midgets, and they completely knocked all the wind out of me. And they were taught not to, especially Snitsky, taught not to let young guys take their own bumps. This also means I was a champion during 9/11, by the way, which is a huge, huge responsibility. Because I didn't know that in times of turmoil, people look around, they turn to their nearest tag team champion. And that was me. But I think the problem was a lot of the big guys, like the Snitskys of the world, they were taught, because it looked good, like, the guys like Bob, you just smash him down as hard as you can and fuck his injuries, fuck his body. They're there to make you look good and get hurt for you. They are there to make you look good. They're not there to get hurt for you. But don't let them take their own bump. So, like the Big Show or the Undertaker will give a choke slam and they just ride down with you. And it's like the safest thing in the world. Kane, etc., etc. Dude, to this day, I'd wrestle Mark Henry or Big Show or Kane, and having never even met them, versus wrestling Gene Snitsky, and he wasn't the only one guilty of it, by the way, but just being applauded for doing wrestling wrong by just hurting you. And then we had these pre-ROH, these Jersey All-Pro guys come in. Homicide, his buddy Boogaloo, a guy named Skinhead Ivan, who we changed to Crazy Ivan, and like 3 or 4 other guys who just couldn't. Homicide was the nicest of them, actually. I liked him. I lost my cell phone once and he found it for me. He was a really sweet guy. The others, I don't have a good thing to say, but Low-Key, oh geez, I forgot about Low-Key. That was like the other big star. Homicide was cool enough. I didn't have to wrestle him because he liked to give everyone that vertebreaker off the second rope, and I thought that's going to kill, so I just got lucky. But basically, these guys had their asses kissed just so certain guys in WXW could get booked in Jersey, in my opinion. Everyone except Homicide was a fucking asshole when those guys came in. Low rider guys, whatever the fuck I don't know the name of that goddamn tag team, because there was 2 of them. Oh, All Money is Legal. That was the name of one of the tag teams. They were the biggest, tiniest pieces of shit. So these guys were all trained by Homicide and just taught to stiff people and never sell anything and all that strong style bullshit. And they were impossible to work with. But politics, that's the thing. There'd be a fake tough guy thing where, okay, they'll stiff you when you trust them not to, and then brag about stiffing you. And if you fight back, then you're the one who's hard to work with, because politically people want to wrestle with them and their stupid Jersey promotions, because there's a few dollars there, I guess. So, yeah, I didn't have a great time, huh? How about this? Jesus, is this why I never talk about this and I just talk about modern shit on the show? Eventually, WXW, my time came to an end. One of the guys who was newish, but I had his first match with him in 2002, and my last match, WXW, in 2003. I let him beat me. Obviously, it was my idea. I thought I was moving to Phoenix for some reason, but I ended up moving to San Diego. Better choice. But I just told him, listen, I'm leaving. It's my last day. I was living back in the burbs in New York at the time, driving just once a month, do the wrestling. And I just said, hey, can I just have a career-ending match? Just get what you can out of me. I'll have a good match with this kid for the first match. And I did. I had a great back and forth, a lot of great near falls and everything else. He beat me with 3 reverse sit-out razor's edges, if you could picture that. One of them, he hit one. I did an up and over in a corner. He caught me. 1 2 7/8 foot on a rope, dragged me to the middle. 2 7/8. Did one, picked me up. Did a third one. 1 2 3. Goodbye. And that was it. And I went to the hot dog guy. I stood on a bar stool, and I chugged the ketchup. Which I heard he was upset about later. And then later, I was in a hotel with a couple of wrestlers and some whores, and one of the Samoan guys and another guy. Gotta be very careful who I name here. Drove out drunk, and at 4 in the morning they totaled their car and didn't get killed, thankfully. But I'm sure there was a big DUI related because of that. And then we got a big. I remember I was still part of the email list, so I got an email about the tragedy that happened the night before. And I mean, I think they were banged up. They were hurt, not like they still wrestled and everything else, but they were just a little beat up and rode their car off the road or something. But the tragedy that befell upon them because somebody was driving drunk. So, you know, if you're up to date with current Samoan wrestling news, some things don't change. That's my time in WXW. And there's plenty I've left out because I can't cover everything. I'll put it this way. If you've seen the wrestler Mickey Rourke, the first third of the movie, the first company he wrestles for, pretty much everyone in that locker room I've wrestled. The guy who became the referee for the Ernest Miller Mickey Rourke match at the end of that movie, Supreme Lee Great, which is a terrible name. Sorry, John. No offense, man. I should have been. I had trouble getting along with John. I wish we got along a little better. I mean, it was tumultuous times. We were on different sides of different cliques, and whatever. He wasn't a big fan of me though. I was a silly whatever, and I think I became a good wrestler, especially in 2002. I was 22. I was doing more aerial moves. I was doing a lot of Hurricane Ranas off the top rope. I did the Dragon Rana. I'd climb up from behind the guy sitting on the top rope, spin around him, and then do the Rana off the top, jumping over the top onto the guy and everything else. And I would try to be as athletic as I could, and I was able to listen and definitely listen and be carried. Sure, my wrestling itself was way better when I was 28 through 30 in San Diego, but that's a story for the day. Here I am now. I think I'm paying the price more to this day. My body's paying the price for early 2000s WXW. Excuse me. Than I am for the 2008 to 2010, 11-ish San Diego New Wave Pro Wrestling run. I think the one in my early 20s is still hurting me the most. This whole thing. Here's the thing with concussions and shit. Like we weren't allowed to block chair shots to the head. Does that sound crazy to you? Like if you put your hand up, they would call you superstar. Oh look, superstar puts his hand up. He thinks he's The Rock because The Rock put his hand up, and The Rock was on Raw and SmackDown and main event WrestleManias at the time. So, put your hand up, but you put your superstar. And if you even with taking a big boot or a drop kick, you weren't allowed to put your hand up. And when I say you weren't allowed to put your hand up, little guys who were also referees were not allowed to put their hands up and block. So I took several chairs to the head. Not several. I mean, I remember the first one where Samu did it. And it had a little cushion on it. It was like a cushioned folding chair, and it's still dented. It didn't matter. So at least everyone thought it was fake as fuck and still caved my skull in because it's being swung by a monster. So, like, what's the difference? But I remember opening my eyes and I see Pops sideways because I'm laying down. He's on the outside of the ring apron, which is the hardest part of the ring. I remember seeing that. And he's like, "Son, are you okay?" I'm like, "Bro," and he's like, "Stay down. Sell it. Act like you're hurt." I'm like, I think I could pull that off. So there was a lot of that. There was one where I had Nicky Ice. We weren't a tag team yet. He had their hardcore title because we mimicked a lot of things that was happening on TV at the time. So we had to have a hardcore title where you could, like Crash Holly, you could fight 24/7-ish anywhere. We would do all that nonsense. And at one point, we were supposed to have a brand split A and B, but then we didn't. It was really silly. Anything they were doing, we were mimicking badly. We even had a Wing and Eagle belt as our championship belt for a little bit, which I think was one of Yokozuna's his championship belt that they let him keep or whatever. The replicas didn't exist at the time, so we actually had a WWF Wing and Eagle belt as our belt for a while, which is crazy. Yeah, I had Nicky Ice throw like an 1.5-inch thick wooden folding chair at my head, which is worse than any of the fucking steel chairs. And then you just had a concussion, and you just went to the ground round, which is like an Applebee's, or whatever, and you ate your chicken tenders and shut the fuck up. And you would say, oh, my head really hurts. And he would be like, yeah, don't go to sleep. And all this bullshit. And I've heard this horse shit on the Bruce and Conrad fucking podcast for years. We didn't know. If we knew then what we know now, fuck you, all of you liars. You knew then. You knew and you didn't care. You knew concussions and big blows to the head were bad in the 90s and probably the 80s too. You lying fucks. If we knew then, that's a coverage because you have Benoit guilt. That's fuck you people. Because for every successful wrestler, there's 10,000 that are just limping around with a beat up life right now. This was a bad idea. Why did I do this to you guys? I'm so sorry. The Luna Vachon link will be in the description for the YouTube version of this. Okay? So if you're listening on Podomatic, I'm going to put both links for this episode and the Luna thing in the comments, okay? And then I'm going to go see the new Snake Eyes G.I. Joe movie, which I could already say without seeing it, probably going to be arguably the greatest film ever made. Well, that's a little bit of my wrestling past. So if I'm a little ornery, if I'm a little cranky on new wrestling, or if I get a little mad about bumps that were taken for no reason, that's why. Because I'm not just watching them, and I'm feeling them. So that's why I've been a little cranky. And thankfully, really, the last couple of Raws and NXTs have been pretty good. So, less to complain about. But well, anyway, that was something different, a little more personal for the 100th episode. But I'm grateful they taught me how to correctly take turnbuckles because I hate bad turnbuckles. I'm grateful I learned how to correctly go over the top rope, especially backwards. You grip with one hand and lean back with your other and put your hand over your forehead, but now you're upside down, mind you, and your hand is over your head. So you can even pretend as you land on your feet that you hit your face on the ring apron, which, if you didn't know, is the hardest part of the ring. It's the hardest part of the ring. Happy 100, Bob Squad!